Welcome to the Music Chamber Podcast. I'm Dan Hegarty, and I'm here at Ultimate Studios. And we're here to bring you an excellent music show. We have guests here who are going to talk about their music industry experience. We have great bands perform here. We have a very professional setup, as you can see. What? No, it's fine. As I was saying, we have excellent musicians who play here, great guests, and you're going to get to see a little bit of that and hear some too. Check it out, and come right back.
You're going to learn lots.
It's too bad how things change quickly. Beauty can decay. It's too bad.
I can't pay my bills on time with $8 an hour, so I meet you at the bar tonight for the happy hour. I said,
the evening's evil. We are the atmosphere. Atoms filled with fear. Being together for, I would say, you got to play for 6 months or a year because you're not even a band yet. You don't have your shows together. And for me, if you can't play for an hour, you can't make money. An hour. Not 40 minutes, not 30 minutes, an hour.
They giving you a budget to work inside of? Is it that kind of thing?
Comes from the label mainly, I think, that limits the manager. The manager sees what they have to do with that money and how many shows they want to do with that money. So it affects how many people go on the road.
If you see me sweat and you see me crying on stage, you see me bleeding, it's real.
Yeah.
You know, and the guys play really hard and we give them a show. That's how you get to the next level.
So now you see what we do here at the Music Chamber. We have great musicians, we have excellent guests, we have a lot of good friends who come to see us, and what?
Dude, our guest right now, they're alone in the studio. We forgot again. We're sitting here doing this video. We left him alone in the studio.
This is what happens when you put drummers in charge of things.
Oh my God.
We got to get to the guest right now.
We got to go.
Let's
we gotta
go.
All right.
What's happening, everybody?
Hello, we are live. Welcome to the Music Chamber, everyone. Dan Hegarty here.
Charlie Waymeyer over here.
And we're here with my good friend and longtime professional collaborator, Mr. Scott Bomar. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, sir. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here. So here's a little background on Scott. Scott and I know each other from the work that we do in music licensing and publishing. Scott was a songwriter who got into the publishing side of the business while working for BMG.
True.
You were a songwriter for Sony ATV. You are an author and a researcher now as well. I understand you've done some work with the Library of Congress, the Country Music Hall of Fame. Scott also has a great podcast of his own called Songcraft, where he interviews people such as Steve Cropper, Loretta Lynn, Talib Kweli, Vince Gill, Desmond Child, Mike Stoller, people who wrote a couple of songs that maybe one or
That's
two
an
of you have heard
impressive
about.
list.
Yeah, Scott is the man, and I really appreciate you being here today. And Scott is also trying to help us out by throwing the feed out on his Facebook as well.
I am, but I'm a grandpa, so I have no idea. I don't know what I'm doing here.
All right, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out.
Share
I'm going to let you drive,
All right.
Dan.
So while I drive, why don't you tell us a little bit about your songwriting days and how they led you to work in the publishing side of the music industry?
Yeah. So I actually grew up in Nashville, and I grew up around the music industry. Obviously, Nashville is a big country music town. At least it was at that time. It still is a big country music town now as well, but there's a lot of other stuff going on in Nashville, more than country music these days. But because Nashville was so much a country industry city when I was growing up, it was the kind of thing that most kids weren't into, because it was so ubiquitous, and it was kind of what was, country music wasn't necessarily the coolest thing in the world, when I was growing up. So I wasn't really tuned into the idea of like songwriting or the music business and that kind of stuff when I was a kid. But as I got a little older, I started appreciating the songwriting and the craft of songwriting. And in a lot of ways, a lot of the people that are writing for country music are really kind of like keeping alive the traditions of songwriting that
They're all set.
that go back to like the brill building era of pop and rock writing and stuff. It's like a lot of the people that were writing the country hits had a lot of a lot of diverse influences and stuff. And so as I kind of got a little older, I saw that, maybe there's a place in Nashville for, a guy that isn't necessarily a huge country fan.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, I moved to California and kind of became a big traditional country fan after I moved to California.
Now that we're out of Nashville and we're in movie star land, let's get into
right.
traditional country now.
Exactly. So I actually wound up in college. I started writing songs, getting serious about writing songs, and then by the time I moved to LA, I got real serious about it. I thought, well, maybe I could actually make a little money at songwriting. Mm-hmm. And so I was pursuing it. I ultimately signed a deal with Sony ATV in Nashville, but I was living in LA.
Right.
And so what I would do is every 6 to 8 weeks, I would fly to Nashville for 10 days, and I would write. I would try to go pitch songs. I had the deal, but I was still like hustling to be in the game, you know. And I got a few cuts, obviously no hits. Never really was able to get off the ground, so to speak. I feel like I grew as a songwriter. I became a much better writer. But after a few years of doing that, it was like I realized I have to move back to Nashville if I really want to make this thing happen.
Right.
It's kind of like you must be present to win. And so
was there a massive cost of living difference in those days too between Nashville and Los Angeles?
As now, it's a lot cheaper to live in Nashville than it is to live in LA.
Okay.
But I wasn't ready to move back, even though it was my hometown.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of determined to make this thing work by just visiting, and I realized that it's really hard to do that,
Yes.
because Nashville, as it has become in the hip hop world or the pop world or the rock world or whatever, a lot of it is kind of about your community, your fellow writers, the people that you're kind of part of that scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized, I've either got to move back there or I got to stay here in LA and figure out what I'm going to do.
Mm.
And the type of stuff that I was writing, I'm not a producer. I don't write beats, know. And there were a lot of people in LA that were like pushing me that direction. I'm like, well, that's just not what I do. So I just kind of had this moment where I said, I'm either going to just keep doing this and running into a wall or figure out something else. So that was the transition into music publishing.
Right.
Basically moving to the other side of the desk, out of, I'm just not ready to go back to Nashville, and that's not what I want to do. So I'm going to find a way to stay in the business that I love, and still kind of be a part of it. And having been a songwriter, sort of having a passion for other songwriters and what they do, and finding a way to be able to be just one piece of the puzzle that is the world that kind of supports creative people and songwriters.
Right.
So that's kind of the transition point of how I wound up getting out of the professional writing world and into the publishing world.
Right. And it seems that because you do have a lot of passion for music and for songwriting, you went into a part of the business that actually supports and facilitates that. It's related to the thing that you like. I mean, I got into the music industry, especially on the royalties and financial and copyright side, because I was playing in bands when I started this journey, and I wanted to be able to bring something to the table as a player, not just in terms of can I play 1, 2, 3, 4, but I need to have some sort of additional valuable skill. So being a hard rock and heavy metal and hardcore guy, that world exists at night. So during the day, I had to do something to live in New York, and in New York, there's none of this like. You can couch surf for a little while, but man, people get sick of you in New York with that stuff. So
right.
You got to have a gig of some kind, or just like be really lucky. But I was like, all right, I'll go to work. I want a music industry job that does not go till all hours, so I can still play.
Right.
And the licensing and publishing and royalties and copyright side had reasonable hours.
Right.
So that's how I got into my end of the business as well.
Yeah, and then you can do things like eat.
Yes.
And pay rent,
and
and those are good things.
Pay for metro and car and whatever else. Actually, get to your gigs and your rehearsals and the shows.
Yeah,
buy more gear.
Buy more gear. Absolutely.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think that this whole process to most musicians is there's a lot. I have a lot of friends that make a great living doing this that aren't necessarily doing it directly like you, or like you are, but the writing and placing. But I'd say the majority of the people I know trying to scrape out a living as a musician are still trying to figure out this whole. How do I get a song licensed? What do I do?
Yeah.
Because it's like the one place that everyone knows there still is
money.
a fair amount of money. I mean, not
Right.
the only place I guess that's
Comparatively,
wrong, but
yeah.
comparatively, yes.
Yeah.
Well, not just that, but in terms of just intellectual property in general, you control your masters and you control your publishing. You have options
Right.
for licensing and for anything else as well. So let's talk a little bit more about licensing now, because that's what Scott and I have done a lot of.
Yeah.
So you're a musician. You've got a song. You don't know anything about how to protect it, and you heard a publisher can help you make money. Let's clear up some of the gray area here. What would you recommend to musicians who are writing their own songs and they're like, I got to protect this so that I can get paid?
Yeah. Well, you know, the first thing that kind of pops into my mind is when you think about protecting your copyrights, protecting your songs. I think there's a lot of people out there that are overly paranoid that people are out to steal their songs. There's very little straight up song stealing that happens, you know. And so I think that people, you know, they go through these. You don't see this as much anymore, but people used to do things like mail themselves their own song so that they could prove, like, well, it existed in this date, which that doesn't, you know, hold up in court. But if somebody wants to,
You used to do that.
you know, if somebody wants to,
Not just you.
if somebody wants to protect their song, then they just need to go to the copyright office, copyright.gov, and register their songs, register their copyrights if they want to go to that level of protection, you know. Honestly, that's not anything that I ever did before I, you know, had songs published or anything like that. But if people were worried about it, then that's something that you can do on your own, you know, for
And
peace
it's a
of mind.
reasonable price. I did this with my solo project, Conflict 10, last year. I believe it's around $55 or something.
Yeah.
And you can either do, if you are the musician, if you recorded this and you own the rights to all of the songs, you can actually use one form to register both things.
Right.
Now, if you want to get into crazy levels of legal protection, there's different forms. There's the PA form for the publishing, and there's the SR form for sound recordings. But if you are like, just this is your baby and you love it and you want to protect it enough so that when things take off, you've got some control, the SR for both will handle everything.
Yeah.
Like I said, $55 for.
Can you do it as a collection too, right?
Yeah,
Right.
you can do it as a body of works, you know, or you can do individual. There's a lot of options.
Yeah.
And if you do something wrong, they will contact you. So don't worry about that too. I got a little something because I didn't check one of the boxes, or where they were confused about it.
Yeah.
So I had to explain myself. But you know,
Yeah.
it's not that much money considering how much money you spend on gear and recording and mixing and whatever else involved in
Yeah.
being an original musician. I think the $55 to have it registered is worth it.
Yeah, and like you say, you can do it as a group. Like, you could go register every one of your songs as a separate individual copyright, but, you know, why? You can just
When I was
group them
younger, I
together.
did that. It was a lot of money for
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
no good reason, really.
right. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
paranoia is it gave us peace of mind. We bought peace of mind when we
Right.
did that. But-
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
But, you know, to your question, I mean, in terms of what does a writer get from their publisher? I mean, in terms of protecting their copyright or protecting their intellectual property, there's not really a lot that a publisher is going to do for you in terms of protecting your intellectual property that you can't do for yourself, you know. But what your publisher hopefully can do that you can't is exploit that intellectual property, find opportunities to, you know, license those songs, to get usages of those songs that you maybe don't have the connections, the ability to get on your own.
Right.
So, you know, the real benefit of giving up your publishing or giving up a portion of your publishing or whatever it is how well connected is your publisher? What does your publisher, what connections they have to exploit those songs for you, you know, to get the kind of usages that obviously writers want to see.
Yeah. Now, here's another question that does come up from time to time. If you get a publishing deal, you sign with, say, it's BMG or Universal or whatever, are you also now automatically registered with ASCAP and BMI, or do you have to do that in addition to having your publisher?
Yeah, you have to do that in addition
Okay.
to having your publisher. So, you know, that's up to you to go and pick your PRO, your Performing Rights Society, basically, and you have ASCAP, you have BMI, you have
CSAC.
CSAC, and now there's the new one.
That's right.
Yeah,
I forgot the name, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, Irving Azoff, I think,
Yes.
started it, and so, you know, that one's really exclusive. I think you have to get invited to be. You have to be. You have to be Bruno Mars or somebody to get invited.
You
to
have
be part
to
of
be
that.
at a certain level to get into the Irving Azoff PRL.
Yeah. But that is something that you go do on your own. And in fact, when you get paid performance money, that money comes directly to you. It doesn't go through your publisher. So,
right, because the publisher would collect on the publisher share of the song, and the writer would get the writer share.
Exactly. So you get that money directly funneled to you, not going through your publisher. So if you write a song that's being played on the radio, or it has a usage in television or film or something like that, then the writer's share of that is going to come from your performing rights society, and it's going to come right to you.
Right. Now, publishers usually have to work with labels in order to play songs, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you are an independent artist saying you own your masters, it's easier for you to work that particular record if they own the masters and they're the only writer on the song, correct?
Yeah, I mean, a one-stop shop is appealing, you know. If somebody wants to license a song for use in a commercial, and it's, you know, there's 2 songs that they love equally, and one of them has 11 writers with 11 different publishers, and then another party that owns the master, versus one guy who owns the master and owns the song that he wrote by himself and owns his own publishing, it's a lot easier to clear that song and clear it quickly, you know. So, yeah, there's something appealing. Now, all things being equal, I mean, sometimes a song with multiple writers and different ownership is just a better song, and so they're going to go after it for whatever reason, either because it's better or it's more popular or it fits the usage better.
True.
But you know, a lot of publishers like to have master ownership so that they can do a one-stop shop for sync licenses, so that it's you know, that's something a publisher can pitch, you know, that they can offer, like, hey, if you want some of this stuff, we can. It's one-stop shop. We can clear it all. We can clear both sides, master and publishing, and make it very easy. And you know, for people who are clearing music and having to do so quickly, that's obviously pretty appealing.
Yeah. Now, here's another thing that becomes a topic of great debate. I've given my own thoughts to this on probably at least one other podcast besides this one. Who gets what in the songwriting process if you're in a band? You have drums, bass, guitar, vocals, and a keyboard player. How do you split up the song? How does it work?
I'm going to answer that question in a roundabout way.
You are a publisher.
I'm going to answer that question in a way to encourage people who are in bands to think about how they want their band relationships to go. The other day I was trying to think of bands that are like stadium size bands that have been around for multiple decades and have had the same lineup for the entire amount of time that they've been a stadium size band. And I couldn't come up with many, but I came up with ZZ Top, and I came up with U2. Now, I don't know how ZZ Top does it, which I should because BMG administers their catalog. But I know that with U2, every song, all 4 guys are writers, everything's split evenly. So, you know, it just makes me think,
They've been that way for their whole career, right?
Yeah.
No lineup changes since 1979.
Yeah. So it makes you think, what causes infighting in bands as they get bigger, as they get more popular? And you understand why, if the lead singer is the main songwriter and, you know, suddenly he starts getting that, or she starts getting that performance money and starts getting that money for being the songwriter, and everybody else is just getting paid as the band, and then suddenly the front person is, you know, driving a brand new vintage Porsche or, you know, whatever, and everyone else is still kind of, you know, in their Civic, you know, then you start seeing bands, the jealousy starts, the infighting starts, you know. Now, that's not to say that if you're the lead singer of a band and you write all the songs that you automatically should give away a portion of the publishing to your band members if they're not writers, but that's a decision that every band has to make on their own. And it does seem that when they keep it collaborative and don't worry about, you know, this split or that split on one song or another and just keep everything equal, it seems to prove more harmonious and you know, it gives longevity to the band. But that's something that every writer has to decide for themselves, you know. I think about Creedence Clearwater Revival. John Fogerty, like, was that band, you know, to the point that he controlled, like, what licks everybody played. And there was a lot of resentment. And the other guys in the band, I think, came to really have bad feelings toward him. And they said, we want more input. And then so at some point, they did an album and it was like, okay, everyone gets the same number of songs, everybody gets equal input, and the album sucked. So, you know, you have to sort of look at, so you have to say, well, what works, you know, for a particular band. But I will say, if you want harmony, you want longevity, it's probably better to be generous.
Bori on YouTube, he says that Rush was another band like
Split
that.
everything?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because another one, the band had the same issue like that.
Yeah.
It was all like Robbie Robertson, wasn't it? He
little-
wrote most everything, but he wrote it for one of the other guys because that was the draw. And he's the one that was able to basically sell the band. But in the end, he got nothing. I think Levon Helm, basically, they were in court up until he died trying to settle that stuff.
Yeah, Levon always said that they wrote pretty equally. That they would like literally have a typewriter in Big Pink in their house up in Saugerties, New York, and you know, somebody would come by and write a line, and somebody else would come by and write a line. Dylan would come by and write a line, you know, and it was all very. I mean, that was sort of Levon's take on it, and that Robbie somehow, you know, wound up getting
it,
more
yeah.
control of it. And who knows? I mean, who knows what really happens in these situations? But if you read Levon's autobiography, it kind of makes you go, "Ooh, that's you know, something went awry in those relationships."
He had a documentary on Netflix too that showed some of that, especially at the end when his health was failing and he was broke, and a lot of resentment there with him from
That'll do it.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
And he seems like a pretty easygoing guy, so it obviously takes a lot to build resentment, I guess.
But the thing is, I totally agree with you though. If you split it, whether it's an even piece of the pie or if you're the singer and you write most everything and everybody else gets a chunk of something and keep everybody happy, you can work so much longer because you take most of your fighting out of the equation. So all that energy and that people put towards to squabbling over usually money is now not an issue anymore.
Right.
I think it really does behoove every group of individuals, whether it's a duet or a band or some sort of collaborative force. If you guys lay that out in the beginning, it avoids a lot of problems later. It's not a comfortable conversation to have.
Right.
But I think
it's uncomfortable if you leave it till later.
It's even worse if you leave it for
once
later.
You actually,
point.
Once there's real money you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that you see this too, like I was talking about Nashville earlier and how Nashville, you know, traditionally Nashville has been a little different as a songwriting community than say New York or LA, and it's still it's changing, but it's still to a large degree the splits for a song. You just take the number of people that were in the room and divide it, you know, divide it up equally. So the thing is, if you and I are co-writers and we've written 15 songs together, well, it could be that maybe 8 of them you really did most of the heavy lifting, and you know maybe 7 of them I did the heavy lifting. But the idea is sort of, in the end, it's all kind of going to sort of wash out rather than bickering over. Well, I think I should get 62% of this one, and especially with you know, the licensing world that you and I have very much been a part of, you see how long it takes just to get these songs cleared and paid because people are arguing about splits and they don't decide what the splits are in advance. And there's almost a whole wing of the music industry that you and I have been a part of, which is designed to accommodate the dysfunctionality of the business. I mean, if people went into a session, a writing session, and they agreed on splits before anyone left the room and everybody signed it, you and I probably wouldn't have ever gotten jobs in this industry.
Our jobs were totally built around these disagreements. So keep fighting, you guys. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, Bori's got a question here from YouTube. He says, do solo artists or songwriters have more appeal to publishers than bands for these reasons? Is there because of less drama and personalities to deal with? Does that have any relationship or relation to what a publisher may be interested
I'll
in?
let the publisher field that one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've never really worked on the creative side of music publishing. I've always worked more on the, you know, copyright licensing side of it. So I can't say what the average publisher is thinking in terms of what they want to sign. You know, I think a lot of it has to do with changes in the industry. I mean, if it's like early to mid 90s grunge era, probably everybody wants to sign bands because that's what's happening, you know, and right now that's not really what's happening as much.
I never looked at it that way.
You know, publishers want to
make money, so they want something that's selling and popular. So,
exactly.
yeah,
I mean,
okay.
the publishers really do. Market share is very important to publishers. You know, publishers want the bragging rights to say, we had X number of songs on the Billboard chart this week, or, we had whatever percentage market share for music publishers in this quarter, and it's real fierce. I mean, it's competitive, and that's one of those markers that, like, all the big publishing companies, they want to have those bragging rights. They want to have the most market share. So, to my mind, signing a band is a lot cleaner and a lot less drama, but also a band is maybe going to put out a record every couple years versus a person who's in there writing, a big pop writer, and they're writing on stuff all the time.
Or if it's a producer who's constantly getting songwriting credits that
right.
always has a hit of some kind.
Yeah, and you have to weigh, like, well, if we have 100% of a band versus we've got somebody who's really hot, but they have 20% of all these songs, at what point does it all kind of even out or whatever?
Like a Timbaland or a Pharrell or somebody like that.
Yeah.
So
I think it's really cyclical. I think that's my hunch. I'm not an expert on that side of the business, but my hunch is that it's a lot of not so much setting the tone of what is happening, but like trying to follow the changing winds of pop music and what's popular. So whatever's popular, we need to have as much of a foothold in that as we can. I mean, it ultimately is a business.
If you were writing specifically for licensing, then would you say look at what is popular now and base what you're writing off of that?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I think that, and I could be completely wrong, bear in mind I'm no longer a professional songwriter. I got into the music publishing because I wasn't able to make that career soar in the way that I envisioned. So I probably would recommend you not listen to my opinion. But as somebody who interviews a lot of songwriters I have a songwriting podcast called Songcraft, and I interview songwriters from all different genres and all different eras. And ultimately, if there's any thread that I sort of see that runs through that amongst those different writers, is people who have a healthy sense of who they are and what their voice is and what they bring to the table. And if you have somebody who just is kind of trying to chase, the publisher, I understand why publishers are sort of chasing fads, because they're trying to see where the market is. I mean, it's the exact same thing that, any company is going to do. Like, where is our market? How can we make the most profit off of the public? That's the business mindset. But if you are a creator, if you're an artist, I think the question you have to ask yourself is, what do I do that's unique? What's unique to my voice? What distinguishes me as a songwriter or as an artist? And how do I find a way to make a living or to capitalize on that thing that I bring to the table? So I think, I'm not trying to dog out the publishers because they're in the business of making money, and I get that. But I think as a writer, you really do have to have a sense of artistic integrity and a sense of artistic self, and then don't be afraid to find ways to exploit it. It's not wrong to make money off of your talent, but first you have to know who you are. I think if you're just trying to chase the latest fad, that you're not going to stick in anybody's mind or distinguish yourself, from all the noise. You've got to find out what you do and do it the best you can.
I would also like to add to that, being the record label guy that has to pay publishing royalties all the time. I think you really do have to get a sense of which community you belong to as well as a songwriter.
Yeah.
I work on 20 or so different projects every quarter, and across genres from fusion jazz to like southern rock to death metal to electronic stuff, and I see the same names showing up all the time in the songwriting credits. And whatever genre it is, there's always like the metal, a songwriter or producer that's working with all the hot bands, or it's the the DJ or the remixer who's working with all the dance acts. I see the same names show up a lot, and those men and women are very involved in whatever scene that is, whether it's the metal scene or the southern rock scene or the country scene or fusion jazz. And it's like, being part of a community, I think, is gives you more longevity than just chasing the hottest sound right now. I mean, sometimes you can get lucky and hit a home run. Yeah. But if you want to have a 20-year-long career and go to the Hall of Fame, I think you have to know who you are, going back to what you said.
Well, and I remember, and I'm going to give an example here of somebody that I don't know, and I really don't know that much about him. Mm-hmm. But my first job in the publishing world when I got out of songwriting was with Universal. And we used to do a thing every 6 months where we would go through the entire writer roster, and we would put together this huge report of all of the stuff that each writer had out and whether or not it was licensed, and if it wasn't, what was the holdup. And this report was used for this biannual meeting where the executives would go and they would basically review different writers and look at like, well, how well are they performing? Are we going to renew their contract or whatever? So as a former writer, I really took this job very seriously. I didn't want to say that something wasn't licensed when it actually was, or give a false impression of why it wasn't, because I'm putting myself, especially the guys who weren't doing as well, I'm putting myself in their shoes and thinking, at one time maybe I was a guy in a book being talked about by executives, you know, about whether or not to renew this or not. And there's a guy named Dave Cobb who never like had much activity, and he kept appearing on this report, and his name just kind of stuck out to me because I thought, I wonder why he's still here, because he hadn't really seemed to have done very much. But the things that he had done that I'd just sort of listened to in the process of licensing, I was like, this guy's pretty cool. And so now he's a Nashville guy, and he produces Chris Stapleton and Jason Isbell and like the biggest Americana acts. He's like the hot Americana producer in Nashville. Well, this was back in 2009, 2010 that I was seeing this guy's name, and I was like, I didn't even know who he was, and I was kind of worried for him, like, this guy's going to wind up getting dropped. And I actually don't know if he did or didn't get dropped, or if he's still at Universal, or if he's somewhere else now. But now he's a hugely successful producer, a songwriter, hugely in demand. He's like the hottest guy in town for kind of that alt country, Americana, like sort of cool side of Nashville thing. And again, never met the guy, don't know anything about him, but obviously just from looking at kind of the data as a licensing guy, he knew who he was. He stayed true to who he was. He maybe even lost a publishing deal over it, I don't know. But ultimately, at the end of the day,
It worked out.
It worked out, you know, and who knows how many lean years this guy went through. But
probably
he
a
knew
few.
who he was. Yeah, yeah. And so it's cool when you see somebody who really knows who they are and they follow that. And you know, you know, just when I was in that country music world, the people that I was writing with at that time went on to become very successful. There's a writer-artist named Brandy Clark who went on to become like the country darling of NPR, and a guy named Eric Church, who's a huge country star now. And, you know, I was doing this thing for 5 years, and so were they. We all were kind of like starting at the same time. And so these were the folks that I was writing songs with. And then I gave up. I had enough. And so after about 5 years, I said, I'm going back to LA. I can't do this. And they kept at it for another 5 years. And then they broke through and they became these very successful writer artists. And somebody said to me once, like, aren't you jealous of these guys that you were kind of starting out with at the same time and they became so well known? And I'm like, no, because I threw in the towel after 5 years. They still slogged it out for another 5 years after that. And then it happened for them because they stayed true to like their voice and who they are, and they had a sense of artistic integrity and who they were and what they did. So they didn't chase the flavor of the month. And again, who knows how many lean months they had. But ultimately, I mean, Eric Church is one of the biggest stars in country music now. So, you know, it's cool when you see people stay true to who they are. And, you know, for some folks, staying true to who you are means you're going to wait tables for the rest of your life, you know. But if you really have that thing and that dream and that desire in you, you're not going to be happy if you try to change yourself to make a buck. You have to stay true to who you are and what you do. And if that means having a straight job and playing music at night, then if it's in you, then you're gonna do it, you know.
Yeah, you really do have to be honest with yourself about what you're willing to endure and where you want to go. These are important things, and I think a lot of musicians tend to not think about that, especially in the beginning of their careers. Like, I'll be doing this in 2 years. Like,
right.
Hang on there. It might be a little longer, or maybe not.
Yeah.
And then the opposite problem happens to people too, where they get too much too soon, and then they blow it because they do start listening to this like chase the friggin' trend advice. And
yeah,
I've seen that happen too. I've seen that where I worked at Atlantic before I made the transition over to California, and I would see like songwriters and producers and artists getting co-writes like every friggin' thing for like 2-3 years and then gone.
Yep.
And never come back.
Yeah.
We're not talking they disappear for 3 years and do some. No, I'm talking finished.
Right.
To the point where they're out of the music business completely.
Yeah.
So
It's not an easy business to be in.
no, it is not.
And if you don't carve out an identity, then when the wind shifts, then you're going to be forgotten.
Yep.
Totally.
Now,
So
I've got a question. I want to go back on something you said earlier, because as you guys are both on the industry side.
Mhm.
I'm like on the lowly, recording, songwriting, that sort of side. And
This
you
is
talk,
not exactly lowly, my friend.
well, not lowly. No.
There are some guys in their bedrooms going, "Fuck that guy."
Yeah, but
He's
you
got a studio.
you talked about pitching your songs. I mean, even when you had a deal, you were still pitching. I'm curious, what exactly is the pitching process, and how do you determine or find the connections to who you're going to pitch to? Whether it's music or it's a book or anything. How does that?
Yeah.
What does that entail?
Well, again, I mean, my experience was Nashville-centric, which is different than other areas. So people who are watching in Nashville, I mean, I can share what, my experience was. But for one thing, I'm a control freak. So, other people are supposed to be pitching your songs for you when you have a publisher. That's kind of the point. But, I also think, if I have the opportunity to pitch songs to people too, even if they hear my song twice, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's what it would take to kind of put it over the edge. So what I would do, and I had a couple of different publishing deals when I was in Nashville, but I would always want my publisher to take me around and introduce me to people at record labels and introduce me to producers and stuff. And some of them I just had no chemistry with, and other ones I kind of connected with. And the ones that I connected with, then, I would next time I was in town say, can I come by and play you one song? And I think that, if you have those opportunities to play your song for somebody, I think the biggest mistake that writers make is making themselves an annoyance. So if you say, can I come play you one song? You go and you play one song. You don't go and go, well, let me play you these 3 other ones because I think you might like those too. Because then the next time that person's not going to say, yeah, you can come play me one song, because they're like, well, I don't have 30 minutes to entertain this person, So
it's a long game.
Yeah, it's a long game. It's a relationship game. Like every business, it's a relationship game. And, I think for me, I just try to be very cognizant. And my father is in music publishing, and so I grew up around I grew up in a music publisher's house. So, I learned a lot about what not to do. And you don't want to make yourself annoying. If you send somebody a CD, well, nobody sends CDs anymore, but if you send somebody if you send somebody 30 MP3s, they're not going to listen to
Right.
them.
No.
You send them your best one, and if they show some interest, then maybe you can send another one, or maybe, but you also have to you have to be real with yourself, you're going to get a lot of rejection. A lot of people are not going to be into your stuff, and you just have to find the people that are. So if somebody says, yeah, this isn't really something I can use, that's not then the invitation to go, well, I've got this other thing, maybe you can use that. You have to just recognize that because publishers, I mean, they're looking for good writers. So if they see a lot of promise in you, then they'll probably tell you, yeah, you're a good writer, you've got good instincts, you're not quite there yet, but keep sending me stuff. And you have to wait for those invitations. You can't force yourself on people. And I think one of the things a lot of people do that's a mistake is they don't think about everybody's so focused on getting into the corridor of power. How do I get into the hallway where the deal makers and the deal brokers are? Because I know if I get in there, I'm so good, obviously they won't be able to deny it. Well, that's not true necessarily. People are so focused on how do I get in that once they finally get there in, they screw up the relationships, because once you get in, you got to have the goods, and maybe you're the best songwriter in your town, and maybe everybody thinks you're a star in your town. But if you go to LA or New York or Nashville, you're not competing against everybody else in your town. You're competing against the best songwriters and musicians in the world. So, chances are you're not going to blow somebody away that's like, I have never in my life heard anyone as talented as you. I've never heard someone who could sing or play or write So, it's just about playing it cool. And we all know what it is to be desperately wanting someone to give you that break, but we all also know what it's like to be around people who are obviously desperate, and you're not attracted to those people.
Right.
Desperation's a turnoff for
sure.
sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it really is a long game. And you know what? When I was writing, I don't like hanging out. I don't like going to clubs at night. I don't like going to hear bands and hang out afterwards till all hours, and for some people, that's what they do. They love that, they love that sense of community and stuff. So you have to figure out kind of who are your people? Who do you connect with?
I think that's a big thing, because I mean that happens with bands and musicians and people just looking for gigs around here too. It's are you the guy or the girl who's going to hang out all night at the bar, or do you need another avenue?
Right.
Again, it's the whole this is becoming a recurring theme on this show is like you got to be honest with
Know
yourself.
thyself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not only knowing your artistic
Self-awareness.
personality, it's also knowing your personality.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, all right, we're a little bit past actually the halfway mark. So let's get some connection going here with the audience. Scott, where can people communicate with you online if they want to find out more about you and what you've got going on? And I know you have a few things which we're going to talk about in just a second. But
well, I've got a website,
Okay.
scottbbomar.com.
okay,
I think it was last updated in about 2012.
all right.
No, but you can reach me through scottbbomar.com. You can contact me.
Excellent.
Through that. But yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of irons in the fire.
You have a bunch of books. You're an author on top of being a songwriter. So
I am.
you've bought a few books here. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Let's start with the first one that I have here in the pile behind you. The Southbound, an illustrated history of Southern rock. Hold it up for the camera so they can see it.
Here we go.
By Scott B. Bomar.
This is Dan's own personal copy.
Yes,
too,
it
right?
is. I'm a fan of Scott Bomar.
I am. I'm glad that you have this book because that means someone bought it.
It's fantastic. Yeah, man. Yes. So let's talk about this. So you wrote this book. What was the impetus to this? What inspired you to be an author?
So I was not good at math in high school. I was good at words.
Nice.
I think that being a songwriter, my love of words, sort of that was kind of part of the songwriting thing. I always enjoyed writing lyrics more than I did writing melodies.
Right.
So I think I just appreciate words, and I like communicating. I like trying to tell a story. I like researching, and I've always loved to read about music. And my wife always laughs at me because she says, music is for listening to, right? Not reading about. But like the only books I read are books about music biographies.
Isn't the quote something like reading about music is like dancing about architecture?
Yes.
Isn't that?
Yes. Which apparently was a Martin Mull quote.
Oh, was
no
it?
one knows where that quote came from. I researched. I'm like, who said that? Martin Mull apparently was the originator of that.
Someone
quote.
here that says Southbound is awesome.
Oh, excellent. Who is it? We've got a
Oldham
fan.
11.
So two people bought it.
Two sales.
You bought it.
You tell your publisher, hey, now, don't be telling me this didn't sell. I know for a fact it's got two out
Two
there.
people bought it. No, so what happened was basically I started, my wife actually encouraged me, the same one who mocked me for reading about music actually encouraged me. She said, you're always reading about music. You should write about music. You're a good writer. And so I said, well, I don't know how people do that. I don't know how one goes about that process. And it really all started. There was an obscure artist named Red Simpson who is no longer with us, but he lived in Bakersfield, California. He wrote songs for Merle Haggard and was like a country guy back in the 60s. And there's a company in Germany called Bear Family Records. They do the Ultimate Nerd Roots music box sets that cost like $200-300. And they had done all these like 1960s Capitol Records artists that were based in Bakersfield and in Los Angeles, and the only one they hadn't done was Red Simpson, and I happen to be a fan of this guy, obscure though he may be. And I reached out to the owner of the label, and I said, how come you guys have never done a Red Simpson box set? And he said, well, Red doesn't want to do it. And I said, well, what if I could get him to do it? And he said, go for it. If you put together the box set, I'll put it out. Or if you write it. And so it's like a 180-page hardback book that comes with these box sets that they do.
Wow.
And so I essentially wrote a book about this guy. I went and interviewed him 5-6 times. I got all his photos. I found like old demos that he'd recorded that had never been released. I basically located like everything I could that this guy had recorded, and we put together this, I don't remember how many discs, I think 5 CD box set. And that was the first thing I ever did, and that was literally just because I went and asked this guy, hey, what's the deal with why and literally that led to another project, which led to another project, which led to another project, but I hadn't really written I just done liner notes.
Right.
And that company, Bear Family, that I mentioned, they gave me the opportunity to do that. I mean, they don't pay very well, so I guess it's like, but it's a label that is very like collector oriented and like super music nerd oriented.
Right.
And so I wound up writing liner notes for them for a project that I got a Grammy nomination for the liner notes, and that was like
That's
mind
amazing.
blowing. I'm on the red carpet with Richie Sambora behind me in the line to go down the red carpet, and then Barry Gibb is in front of me in the so like Barry Gibb goes, you're in this little like cattle call, and Barry Gibb goes out, and all the photographers,
Yeah.
and then
That's a trip, though.
and then
Oh,
I
yeah.
go out, and it's like, who's this guy? So I felt like I wasn't supposed to be there the whole
So
time.
you weren't on the
But-
telecast, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I didn't make the CBS or NBC broadcast, whatever it is. But to answer your actual question, I hadn't written a book, and I have a friend named Randy Poe, who is the president of Leiber and Stoller Music Publishing, who writes on the side, and he's kind of been a friend and a mentor to me because he's a guy who works in music publishing who has this second passion of writing journalistic type, liner notes and stuff like that. His publisher came to him because he'd written a book about Duane Allman, and they said, "We want you to write a book about just Southern rock in general." And he said, "Oh, I'm not your guy. Scott Bomar's your guy."
Awesome.
And I was no Southern rock expert, but Randy is just a good dude, and he hooked me up.
That's awesome.
And so I had grown up obviously in the South. I grew up around Southern rock. I liked Southern rock. I just wouldn't have considered myself an expert. And so it was like, okay, time to dive in with both feet and learn everything I can about this thing and write this book. So
There's an important lesson there, audience. If you get an opportunity, an awesome one, and it's not necessarily something you know right away, you should probably
Say
just
yes.
do it.
yeah,
Do it.
Say yes.
Literally, the publisher called me out of the blue, and this guy says, "Hey, I'm with Backbeat Books in New York, and we hear that we want to do a book on Southern rock, and we hear you're the guy to do it." And I said, "I am." They said, "Are you not?" And I was like, even though I had no point of reference, I said, I probably am. I had no idea who this guy was or why he was calling me. And then 5 minutes later, Randy calls me. He goes, "Hey, by the way, you're going to be getting a call from my publisher." I'm like, "Yeah, I just did." He's like, "Well, I just hung up with him. I didn't know he was going to call you like right away." But so, yeah, that was one of those opportunities where, fake it till you make it. I'm like, I don't know who you are. I don't know why you're calling me, but I want to write a book.
I am your
and,
guy.
I am now the expert on Southern rock, if that's what you need me to be.
You know what? The fact that you also played it a little cool is probably good. Be like, I think I'm your guy. If you're like,
Yeah.
hell yeah, I'm the man for this, they'd be like, oh, fuck this guy.
Right. He's too into it.
Well, now you are the expert on Southern rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, now you are. It's legit.
Yeah.
So that's that book. We've got a few other ones here. Let's talk about these two real quick. We've got two more.
Yeah.
Do you wanna
So
talk about
these
those?
other books that I brought with me, this is again like take the opportunities that come along. So, I'm working at BMG. I'm in music licensing. That is my world. Our CEO, who's based in Berlin, came to the LA office. He did this little town hall meeting. This is about 2 years ago. And he said, we would like to start doing some music-related books. We think that would be a nice thing to add, a nice cherry on top of what it is we do here at BMG. We do masters, we do publishing. We're getting into doing documentaries and concert films. Like, what if we could offer our clients whatever they wanted to do? What if we had books? And so my antenna went up because I'm like, I like to write,
Ta-da.
So by day I'm doing licensing. By night I'm writing articles and liner notes, and books. And so I never met this guy. He's the CEO of the whole company, for the whole global company. So I sent him an email and I'm like, "Hi, I work for you. We haven't met, but I love my job. I'm not trying to get out of it, but I'm a writer. I do journalistic writing, and so if we're going to get into doing some books, I'd like to be involved in that in some capacity." And he was like, "Great. So start doing books. Figure this thing out." And I said, "Oh, well, okay." So that's what we've been doing for the last about 18 months is kind of ramping up and
Wow.
figuring out how we're going to be a music publishing company / record label / music rights management company that also does books. And so we're coming at it very differently than a typical book publisher. We're coming at it as music people, creating music books for music fans and figuring out how to sell them as we would, an album or, a music product. So
Nice.
the first one we did was this Zombies book. And this is, it's called the Odyssey. Odyssey is spelled wrong, as you will see. That's because it's from the Zombies album Odyssey and Oracle,
Nice.
classic album recorded in 1967. right after the Beatles recorded Sgt. Pepper at Abbey Road Studios in London. They went in, and the Zombies, of course, well known for She's Not There, Time of the Season, big British invasion band. So we basically created this like coffee table book, and it's got like handwritten lyrics to a bunch of their songs. It's an oral
Studio
history.
photos too. That's cool.
Yeah, cool studio photos. It's a real oral history of the band. It's got like all these little
Notes.
people talking about the band and what kind of influence they had. So like Brian Wilson and all these crazy Santana and Susanna Hoffs and all these different people kind of weighed in and gave their
Awesome.
That is a
and so
great looking book.
There's 22 handwritten lyrics by the band members to the songs.
Nice.
And then oral history from the 4 surviving original members, and then all this like original artwork that the bass player's wife did.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah, so that came out really cool. So
Awesome. Very cool.
so that's
that's that
the
book.
Can I take a look at that?
yeah, you
Pass
can
it over to Charlie.
oh yeah. So that was our first book, and then we put out recently, Dan, this is up your alley. This is the Metal Blade Records. This is written by Brian Slagle, who was the
head of Metal Blade.
the founder and CEO of Metal Blade Records, with a forward by a drummer fella named Lars Ulrich. I hear he's going places.
Yeah, he's got a band from
He's
San
never got
Francisco.
a shot. No way.
Yeah.
Ah, Charlie's just
Oh
jealous.
wow, this
So-
forward's by Tom Petty.
Yeah, we
that
got
ain't
Tom
too
Petty
bad.
to do the forward in that book. We got Lars Ulrich to do the forward of this book, and we've got another book coming out November 14th, which is called
That Metal Blade book, by the way, audience features Bill Matoyer, who was on the show a few weeks ago.
Yes, in fact, there's a photo
in
of
there.
him in the middle of the book here, which you won't be able to see it. But
Don't show it. Bill'll get mad. Bill's not big on the video. I promised him I wouldn't do it again.
all right, no Bill photos.
Yeah.
So
You have to buy the book if you want to see the photo.
yeah, I like that. So we got the Zombies book, we did the Metal Blade book, and then our next book comes out November 14th. It's called Every Night is Saturday Night: A Country Girl's Journey to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's written by Wanda Jackson, who was
Yes.
Oh yeah.
the queen of rockabilly. She was the first, really kind of the first woman to sing rock and roll.
Fantastic.
Amazing. Dated Elvis. Crazy life, just amazing story. And 80 years old now, great grandma, still out there rocking, still doing it.
I gotta look at
Wonderful woman.
And you are very much involved in that book.
That book I wrote with Wanda. I was the, when someone writes a book and it's their name and then there's the with.
Yeah.
I'm the with.
That's so cool.
Me. So, yeah, I went and spent a lot of time with Wanda at her house, and she lives in Oklahoma City, and we got her life story, and then she and I worked very closely to like put it all together. And so anyway, so we got the Zombies, we got Metal Blade, we got Wanda. All of them are on Amazon. So you can even go pre-order Wanda right now, even though it's not out yet. But
Do it.
yeah.
I just
but
realized
we're,
I should
That
put
book I want to see.
Yeah.
I'm going
This
to put
one-
this book right here so that the camera can get it.
Ah, there you go.
So thank you again for doing all of this with us, Scott. So Charlie, real quick, because we're running a little over, but we're having a good time here. What have you been up to? What can the audience see what you're doing?
Man, I had a 10.5-hour session of what would you classify it? Orchestral black metal something today. Really cool band, but it was a full day of some of the most serious, intense guitar parts that I've ever recorded. And it sounds fucking awesome.
Good, man.
Really good.
Glad
So
you're back
there's
with
a
the
lot of that.
metal.
The best part is on Sunday I was working with an artist named Rob Linus, who's like outlaw country. We were in
Nice.
doing live recordings in here, and then today I'm in a completely other end of the spectrum in the whole metal world, which is fine. Next week I'm back in pop. It keeps it interesting that way.
Good
Yeah.
for you. So I've been spending most of the last week working on our upcoming event on December 7th.
Toys for Tots.
The Toys for Tots benefit that we do once a year here at the Music Chamber. We're working on some sponsors. We have, at this point, I believe the lineup is confirmed. There's going to be a little notice about that.
We're going to wait 1 week and announce it just to make sure everybody's on board.
Yeah, we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but at this point it's just about locked in, and it's going to be a fantastic lineup.
Yeah, we're working on a lot of special stuff for the broadcast as well. If you're in LA, you can come see the show here. You just it's a toy or $20. Bring a toy. I mean, the $20 goes to Toys for Tots too, but bring
Yeah.
a toy.
And the Marines will be our security for the night, so you're not getting past them.
Nope. If you're not in LA and want to see it, you can log on to the Ultimate Studios Inc. YouTube channel and watch it there. We'll also have donate buttons and that sort of thing. But we're also working on some special other video and some things to make the broadcast a little bit cooler,
Yeah,
kind of up in the game a little bit.
most definitely. And once
Speaking
again, I'd like to thank Alex Calise and Dennis Morehouse from Bat Farm for their great performance here
Yep.
on the Music Chamber's studio
2
session.
videos out so far.
Yes, they're both awesome.
Got another one coming out next week with a little bit of an interview that we did with them after the show. So
Excellent. So that's 3 from Bat Farm.
Yep.
Very cool. All right. So let's get through the rest of the show now that Scott's been generous enough to share so much of his time and insight with us. So, Scott, you've been involved as a songwriter. You've done all of this extra work on top of your job, and you've got your own podcast as well, which I want to make sure we talk about here, which is Songcraft. Now, you're driven to do all of this creative stuff despite the fact that you have a very administrative job and a half now that you're doing the books.
Right.
So where are you drawing the creative inspiration from, being as you're a very, very busy guy, but you're still ambitious in that creative way?
Yeah, I really like researching, and so I host the show Songcraft, and by the way, we can be found at songcraftshow.com.
Excellent show. I've heard many episodes.
Or download it on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes.
So the format of the show is everyone is a different. Each episode we speak to a different songwriter, and it's somebody of a different genre or era, and we try to cover a lot of bases. We haven't covered every base, but we've covered a lot, and primarily we try to talk to songwriters who like have written some notable songs, and sometimes they're names that people recognize, like Loretta Lynn or Bill Withers, or sometimes they're famous for being songwriters like a Desmond Child or Jimmy Webb or somebody like that. And then sometimes they're people whose names are not as familiar to the public, but their songs are, like a guy like Jeff Silbar, who wrote Wind Beneath My Wings. Everybody knows that song,
Yeah. I really liked Shelley Pekin's episode with you as well.
Yeah. She's really interesting. And our next episode coming up, which is our 72nd episode, which will launch this coming Monday night, is with Dan Penn, who wrote Do Right Woman, Do Right Man. He was a total like Southern Soul, Muscle Shoals guy, kind of a hero of mine, which is really cool. So, we cover a lot of bases. But to answer your question, I think what I like doing about it is the research. Like, I like figuring out, like, okay, what were this person's hits? What were some of their deep cuts? What's something? My goal is always to like find something that kind of makes the guest go, oh wow, you dug deep. I want to find something that's like really early or really obscure or whatever. And so my co-host Paul Duncan is his name, guy that I went to high school with. We were in our first band together. Basically started this thing because we're both just music nerds, and we're like, well, we talk about this stuff anyway, we might as well talk about it on a microphone. And
that seems to be the recurring theme of many podcasts.
Right?
Yep.
So, he's a lot more like he's the personality guy. Like he comes up with great spur of the moment questions, and I dig deep and try to find this like obscure stuff, and we make for a good team because I think I kind of love the research element, he loves the spontaneity element. And if it was just me, it would be too dry, and if it was
sounds familiar,
just him, he wouldn't like dig out the super deep stuff.
That is exactly.
Yeah, you gotta have the team, right?
I am the researching, preparing, planning guy, and Charlie likes to wing things.
Yeah.
Which is funny because he does way more technical stuff than I do, and he's just figuring
on that side of it. I'm into the research.
That's how ours is too. Paul is the guy running the computer. He does the editing. Like he somehow I'm terrible with Pro Tools. Like the other day, he's like, I had like edited one of the episodes. He's like, look at you did a crossfade in Pro Tools. Like,
he does that to me too.
So it's exactly the same thing. In conversation, he's more spontaneous and personable. But technology-wise, he's got me beat hands down. So he and I really need each other, I think, which is part of what makes the show work. And also, we've been friends for so long; it's like a great excuse to once a week just hang out with my buds. So, I
feel like a lot of creative stuff is that. Like you got to enjoy being around the person just to hang and do something productive together.
Yeah. We're certainly not making any money at it, so we got to have some fun.
Yeah. Yet.
Yet.
I always throw the yet.
Just
in there.
wait. Just you wait.
Got a quick kind of question here that
Cool.
it's kind of a comment, but it actually is a good question. It said, talking about how similar music publishing and book publishing really is, and this person says, wonder if it takes years and years to be successful in book writing like songwriting. Is it similar in that aspect, or is there? I'm not wording this question very well.
I think I know what you're getting
here.
at.
Yeah.
Is the career of an author very much like the career of a songwriter, where it takes years to develop, or is there a different scale? I have an answer to this question, but I'll let you go first.
I will say this. I don't know if I would have a book published today if it weren't for my friend Randy Poe that I mentioned earlier, whose publisher called him, and he took the opportunity to say, you should talk to Scott Bomar. Because, and when I asked him, I said, why did you why did you give me this opportunity? He's like, because you're a good writer, and it's a lot easier to get a book published after you've had a book published. So
That is true.
Take this opportunity and do this book. There's just something about if a guy comes to you and says, hey, I've got a publishing deal with Warner Chappell, and listen to my song. It might not be any better or worse than a guy that comes to you and goes, hey, I'm an aspiring songwriter. Listen to my song. There's just something in your mind. You're like, well, somebody else believed in this guy, so he must be good. And so I think there's a bit of luck in both song publishing and book publishing. Is like, you have to find those opportunities. You have to stay open to those opportunities and take them when they come, to find ways to kind of plug in and do what it is you do. Like I was saying, you do still want to like be true to yourself and who you are. Like if somebody had come to me and said, hey, we want you to write a book on this new diet fad, well, could I have figured out how to do it? Maybe, but that's not what I do. I write about music. So I'm willing to tweak enough to go, well, that might not be the music I know the most about, but it's music that I like, and I'm going to learn about it, because you still have to be willing to change and not be rigid, but you have to also recognize like who you are and stay somewhat within that lane and within that framework. But I think there's some luck to it, and when you have those moments of serendipity when the door gets open to you, you just have to be ready to have the goods once you walk in, because if I'd written this book and it was terrible, then I wouldn't have written any more.
Yes.
So, I think there is similarity there. I think the similarity is that like they both are a craft. They both require work. And to become a good songwriter or a good book writer, the only way to become good is to write.
Yes.
And this book, when I turned it into my publisher, it was twice the length that it is here. And they said, we're not reading this until you cut it in half. We're not even going to read it.
Wow.
And it was painful. It was painful to go back and like chop stuff that I wanted to be in there, And same with songwriting, like you don't need this verse. It's too clumsy. It's too much. Go and cut it out, And so it's that writing, pruning, editing, writing, the only way to get good at anything is to do it.
Yes.
Whether it's, playing basketball or writing songs or writing books or whatever it is, you got to just do it and fail at it a little bit.
And I also, when it comes to the author versus songwriter thing, I do have a friend in New York named Camille Perry. I went to high school with her, and she is an author with Penguin Books now, I believe. She just put out a book called The Assistants, had a tour for it. It's actually being made into a movie now. And she worked on this book. This is an original work that she wrote, and she developed the characters and all that kind of stuff. She was a ghostwriter for like young adult novels for years and did a lot of like small publishing, small press. I think there was some poetry. I'm sorry, Camille, if I'm getting this wrong. But like from the time that she actually got an agent that got her the gig, that got her the book deal, I think the development process was from the day that the paper was signed to the day the book was released was about 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a different track, and especially when you write novels now and original written author material, this is on a specific subject. But if you're creating original content the way that songwriters create original content, you're looking at a timeline where they want to turn the novel into a movie or a TV show.
Right.
So they want you to write the book and get the book right, and they will review it and change it. And you run into the same problems you have with a record deal or publishing deal, where like your person might get fired and then somebody else takes over your project and the company changes and they buy another company. And I remember she actually was at Book Soup on the tour. That's how I reconnected with her. And it was a 5 or 6 year process of review until the book actually came out. Yeah. And then she took the book on the road for 2 years.
Yeah.
And because that book got finished and actually did well, it made the New York Times bestseller list or some other very prestigious novel list. She got to write another book. So it's like you said, write the book so you can get another book. So
and
that's a long-winded way of saying that in my experience with people I know in the real world, it's as long or longer than being a songwriter to be an author.
Oh, no question. And I think what's similar about them is you also have to be willing to take criticism.
Oh yeah.
If you're a writer, you have an editor. If you're playing songs for a publisher and the publisher doesn't think it's a great song, they're going to tell you that. And at the end of the day, maybe it's just their opinion, but it also might be their educated opinion, and you have to be open to the fact that there's no reason to get defensive because why this person does not just decide to say something to be mean to you.
Yeah.
They're giving you their professional opinion, and you can decide. I've had publishers that have given me feedback on songs that I thought, no, I'm going to leave it like it is. That's what I want. But I've also had times where I thought, no, you're right. That is better. It does need to be.
What if you get feedback that doesn't seem to be related to what you turned in. Say it's a song, and the feedback you get, you listen to it, go, okay, I feel like right now I'm getting feedback for feedback, because say you turned in a rock tune and they ask you to make it more like this country song.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where you kind of go, well, that's just not what this is. You know, if you want a country song, maybe I'll go write you a country song. But, you know, again, it comes back to kind of knowing who you are and what you do, you know. And I remember a meeting in Nashville when I was pitching songs, and I played a song for this guy that it was called Lovetown Population 2. And I don't know if I can remember the lyrics because it's been a few years, but the chorus said, welcome to Lovetown, where you can do what you want to do, something, something, Lovetown Population 2. It was very clear to me what this song means, and the guy goes, it's too cerebral. And I was like, what? Like, this song is very obvious of what it's about. That's not cerebral, you know. And so that was the thing where I just go, you're an idiot. You know, like, I'm not listening to that feedback. But I've had other times when I've played something and somebody goes, you know, those verses are really strong. I don't feel like the chorus is as strong as the verses are. I feel like you're setting me up for something and I'm not getting the payoff I want. And I think if you rewrote that chorus, it could really go from being a good song to a great song. And you go, yeah, you know, I think maybe they're right. You know, maybe that's that. So you have to just start figuring out, like, does this resonate? You know, the instinct is to be defensive. Like, it's a fine chorus. I worked really hard on it, you know, but you have to be willing to sort of go, okay, what feedback is useful and constructive and resonates at a deeper level? Because usually the stuff you're the most resistant or defensive about is because deep down you kind of know that it's right.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, I think that's another situation where picking your collaborator is crucial. Like, some people really do bring out the best in each other in terms of their creative kind of flow.
Yeah.
I've definitely worked with guitar players and singers and stuff where I felt like their input on my drumming actually made my drumming better.
Yeah,
And then there were
yeah.
other times where I'm like, fuck this guy.
Right.
So
I remember when I was first kind of getting into writing, you know, I mentioned my dad's in the music business and is a music publisher. He actually started as a songwriter too and was pretty successful. He wrote a couple #1 country hits and then got into the business side of things. I remember early on when I was writing songs and I was still kind of figuring out what to do, you know, he said a couple things that stung. And I remember one of them was I played him this song and he goes, that's pretty good. And you got it all said in just under 6 minutes. And I was like, dang. But
ouch.
But then I was like, yeah, that's too long. Like, it doesn't need to be that long. And I remember another time I played him a song and he listens and I get done and I think it's the greatest song in the world because I just wrote it, you know, and he goes, would you like me to respond to that as a music publisher or as your father?
Oh, boy. Thanks, Dad.
I'm like, I think you just
At that
did,
point, neither.
you
Yeah.
know? But then what's funny is I look back and go, yeah, that song wasn't that good, you know? Like, but when you just have written a song, you think it's the best song that was ever written, you know? You have to get a little distance, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So, but, you know, again, it's like, well, I trust my father because he's a professional, you know, song guy. But secondly, why would he have anything but my best interest at heart? Like, why would he just be like, yeah, I'm just going to be mean to my kid? Like, you know, that's not what his motivating so it's like you find those voices that you trust and you go like, okay, this guy loves me and supports me.
Something else about
know.
distance that I've learned is that I've had the opposite experience where I'll write a song or do a session or do one of these shows and be like, God, that was terrible. And then a couple of days later, I'm like, it's not so bad. And like a week later, I'm like, it's one of the better things. What's wrong with me? That was fine.
Yeah.
And that's you get to that point. I've had people tell me, no, that was a good take. We're keeping that.
Yeah.
And I'd go, no,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not right. And then they'd end up keeping it. And I'd get pissed. And then I'd listen to it and be like, that was the right take.
Yeah. When I was writing songs for Sony, I would demo the songs out here in LA. There's a guy named Marty Rifkin in Santa Monica who's kind of the only guy in LA who knows how to do country demos. And I would go do stuff with him. And he was one of those guys that I trusted where, like, I'd go, oh, I kind of clammed that, you know, guitar chord or whatever. And he'd be like, it's not perfect, but the feeling is right. So let it go, you know.
Very cool.
And, you know, at other times he'd be like, you could do better than that, you know. And you find those people you work with that kind of push you and shape you and that you can trust. Because if somebody does nothing but tear you down, then get away from that person. You don't need them in your life. But
Absolutely
if they
not.
build you up, you know, and they offer constructive criticism, then you trust the constructive criticism because this person just said 6 very positive things where they're obviously a fan of what I'm doing. And then if that makes that one thing, you sort of go, well, I know they're not trying to
Yeah.
to insult me. you know?
Speaking of good constructive criticism, shout out to Jonathan Altman, who's watching us now. Thank you for tuning in, John, our mutual buddy.
Yes, great guy,
Great
sweet
guy. Excellent composer and songwriter in his own right, too. Thank you for tuning in, John. All right, so we're getting close to the end here, Scott. Thank you again so much for being on the Music Chamber.
Yeah, thank you guys.
This
It's
is the
been fun.
part where we kind of throw you the ball. Is there any songwriting topic that you'd like to address or anything else? Or any
Wow.
questions for me or Charlie or the audience? Right,
Wow.
audience? He can ask you questions, right?
What's going on in North Korea? No.
Oh, boy. If we're still around tomorrow, I'll tell you.
No, you know, I think that in terms of what I'm just excited about right now is the developing these books, you know, at BMG and the you know, particularly just having the opportunity to work with these people who are telling their stories, people like Brian, people like Wanda, you know, like obviously with my podcast, it's all about like helping people tell their stories. I love telling stories. I love words. I love communication, you know, all that stuff that we talked about. And so that's what I'm fired up about. And so, you know, if people want to kind of keep up with what's going on and what I'm into, then, you know, follow us on songcraftshow.com and sign up for our email list and find us on Facebook and Twitter and all that good stuff at Songcraft Show. And check out some of the interviews and stuff we've done, because if people are into the business, if they're into songwriting, if they're into publishing.
You even got
you
a
know.
film composer or two on that show, too.
Yeah,
I saw.
yeah.
So
yeah, we've
there's
had
that
some
aspect of it as
film
well.
composing, yeah. We try to kind of cover a lot of bases. Our current episode is with a girl who's 13 years old, you know. So
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So we cover all kinds of
She's
of
got
stuff.
some raunchy tunes, too, if I'm not mistaken, yeah?
Not raunchy, but kind of like about murder and cheating.
Even
and,
better.
Things that
How's that not raunchy?
Yeah, well, yeah. That a young lady, I don't know. I was
That age? How do you know?
Shocked. Yeah. So, but no,
She's
I
really
think
creative.
I think if you want to be a great songwriter, then you should listen to great songwriters. And if you want to listen to great songwriters, you should listen to Songcraft.
There we go.
There
I love
it is.
that.
There
That's
it
a
is.
great pitch. Thank you for tuning in tonight, everybody. Thank you, everybody, listening to this later in the iTunes or SoundCloud format. You can find out more about the Music Chamber at facebook.com/The Music Chamber Live, Instagram, The Music Chamber Live, SoundCloud, The Music Chamber Live, Twitter is at the MC Live.
For sale.
For sale, and we've got some takers, so y'all want this. You got to come get it. Let's have it.
It's got to be a DJ, a rapper, somebody out there that wants that.
Or a comedian.
Or a comedian.
Come get it.
Ooh, that'd be good.
Yep.
They
the
probably don't have
MC
as much
Live.
money as the rappers and the DJs.
Yeah, send everybody
Probably
Mark.
DJ, rapper, comedian.
That guy's busy, or that girl.
The DJs, you know, they got the more money.
That's true.
That didn't.
Although
That sentence I just said made no sense.
This is
Louis
why you're not a
CK
writer.
I'm from
Louis CK
Kansas.
Has a lot of money. You know, there's some rich comedians.
Oh
out there,
well,
so you
yeah.
never
There's
know.
a few.
Sure,
Yeah,
you
that's a
never
good point. See, maybe he wants to buy it.
Yeah, we
He's
should
looking
call
for a side career.
Mark Maron.
Anybody know
any
Louis
of these
CK?
guys? Anybody know them? Maybe they want to buy it.
Or Joe Rogan will buy it.
There you go.
There we go.
We'd love to sell it to Joe Rogan. All right. So thank you again, Scott. It was great having you here.
Thanks, guys.
Really
Great to be
appreciate
here.
it.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
buddy.
Yeah.
And Boris says, shout out. He says, Scott, you're a class act.
Nice. He doesn't know me at all.
Thank you guys for joining us on YouTube and on Facebook.
Yes.
Y'all rock.
All right. Have a great night, everybody.
See you soon.
Thanks.